Hi, I'm Preston Williams, and welcome to another edition of Jazz Talk. Today on our show, we have a very special guest, and I'm so excited to have him on. He's what I would call a musician's musician. He's been on the scene for over 35 years and has worked with many greats from Robert Plant to Paul Simon, George Benson, Chick Corea, and many like Steve Gadd. He is a drummer, composer, and educator. Please welcome to Jazz Talk, Mr. Dave Weckl. Brother, how you doing?
Preston, I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Good, man. It's so good to have you on the show today. You're one of my favorites. And yeah, as I said, with the COVID-19 going on, I've been doing a lot of these interviews. A lot of musicians have been available. So I'm so grateful to you that you took time out of your schedule to sit down and chat with me. Well, Dave, as I said, you've been on the scene for quite a while. You've worked with so many great musicians and put out so much wonderful music. But I'm a little interested in your background, how you got started in music, and how you started playing drums. I understand that you are from St. Louis, Missouri.
That's right.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your background and your humble beginnings, man, how this all started.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. My schedule is not so busy right now because I'm actually in Italy right now.
Okay.
And yeah, so I managed to get out and get over here to see my wife because I'm married to an Italian and we have a place that we're renting here and she lives here. So I was able to come and hang out and get out of the craziness of the States. It's a little more relaxed here. So yeah, so we're hanging and yeah, beginnings. St. Louis, I was an only kid, which allowed, complete spoilization and and no sibling competition. So my parents were very supportive. My mother, I was the fourth try with my parents, so they had me pretty late after my mom was having trouble, having babies. So, for better or worse, they had me. And I was heavily into sports when I was a kid, and I was doing that, and I picked up, I thought I wanted to play guitar when I was about 7, and that lasted a few months because all these little strings, I didn't know what to do with these things. It was too much work, so I didn't do it. But I started gravitating, I was always gravitating towards music. My mom was always singing around the house. My dad was an amateur piano player, so there was always music going on. And I have to give the guy next door, which I haven't been in touch with these people since then, back when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, because they moved out of the neighborhood when I was about 12.
Yeah.
And no, 11, because we left too. But this guy's name was Michael Jordan. Obviously not that Michael Jordan, and no relation. But this guy, him and his brother, they always had garage bands and they were playing, and this guy was the drummer. And so he showed me a few things, and I started beating on boxes and pan lids, and finally my mom had enough of that. So my dad got me a cheap little set for a 3-piece kit, actually, just a kick drum, snare drum, and a rack tom. And I've got funny pictures of, the drums this way, and kind of funny. But I found it pretty easy to play to records and copy some rock stuff and play to it. And then my dad turned me on to some Pete Fountain records because he was a big Dixieland fan. He liked ragtime, and that's what he liked to play on the piano. And he was a huge Pete Fountain fan. And Jack Sperling happened to be the drummer with most of Pete's stuff. And Jack was fantastic. He was just he was really my first introduction, really my first teacher indirectly for playing the jazz style. And he played very clean, and he played kind of simplistic, that in a way that it was not so crazy difficult to figure out. It wasn't like diving right into Elvin Jones or or something abstract or Tony or or even Buddy at that point. But so that was kind of the beginning, and then he brought home a Buddy Rich record, and that was kind of that threw me into being a complete Buddy fanatic for a while, which led into other big bands like Maynard Ferguson, Stan Kenton. Mostly those two, because Peter Erskine. I started getting into Stan Kenton when Peter Erskine was with the band, and it's quite a story with that too, because when I was 15, we had a really good jazz band in high school at Francis Howell High School, actually, in Weldon Springs, Missouri, and award-winning. I got into the band when I was in 8th grade. I wasn't even in high school. I auditioned, and Al McCune at the time let me in, and so the jazz band, the big band, kind of became like our focus. We were a bunch of young kids that were totally into it, and the guys that were older than us, they were sort of leading the way, the trumpet players, and they really got us into it. And so the high school thing was huge for me, as far as inspiration, learning. That I had some really good. My dad finally bought me a real drum set, a Gretsch kit, when I was my 12th birthday, I think. Right. 12th or 13th, I don't remember which one it was, but then I got through that music store, I hooked up with a really good teacher, Bob Matheny, which led me to another teacher, Joe Berger, and between those two, even a guy by the name of John DiMartino was a little bit, and I always forget about John, but he was sort of briefly very instrumental in a few of my developmental things back then when I was a kid. And then, we like I said, we did a lot of concerts, a lot of festivals, and I ended up winning a NAJE scholarship for, of all things, a Buddy Rich West Side Story solo when I was 15. Yeah, I did my best to attempt to do that, but anyway, I won it, and the award was to go to the Stan Kenton camps, and the camp that was in Springfield, Missouri, at Drury College. And so I went there, and that's where I met Tom Kennedy and Ray Kennedy. Realized we were both from St. Louis, and so that hooked us up, which inadvertently hooked me up with Jay Oliver. But at the Kenton Clinic band camp, I was so disappointed because Erskine had just left the band, and I was like, man, But Gary Hobbs was playing with the band. He had just gotten on the gig, and Gary was great. He's a fantastic player as well. So I learned a lot from Gary. I ended up going back to that camp the next 2 years as well. So the big band thing was huge, and then I got into the fusion thing from there. And you mentioned Billy Cobham. I mean, Billy was a huge influence in my teen years. Which kind of led me to, it's the first time I ever heard Michael Brecker was on the Pleasant Pheasant, I think was the name of the record, the name of the song on Crosswinds. And that got me into the Brecker Brothers and some other more of the fusion stuff. And then, and then it's kind of just a escalating, circle of events of inspirational things that happened. Right. I remember Ray Kennedy sitting in the parking lot. I think we were actually there to see Maynard Ferguson. This would have been 1976, maybe. And we're in the parking lot. He goes, "Hey, check this out." I said, "Who is it?" "It's Chick Corea." And he puts this thing on, and I'd never heard drumming like that anywhere. And it was, that was the Leprechaun record, I think. It
was like 1975, 76. Yeah.
Humpty Dumpty with Gad, and so that became my beginning of my obsession with Steve. And, learned a lot from that. And, right. And then from that, I ended up going to college, Bridgeport, Connecticut, and that's when I started really kind of spreading out and getting more into the history of the bebop and different players than I was exposed to in the Midwest. Yeah.
Interesting. Now, Dave, tell me about, I guess when you hit the scene in New York, I guess in the early 80s, you were in a band called Night Sprite. Tell me about that, man.
Yeah, that was those days, man, were so cool. The band was kind of developed Paul Adamy was the bass player in Night Sprite, and
Mm-hmm.
he also went to Bridgeport. Fred Vigdor was invited to the band as well. So
Yeah.
half of us were from Bridgeport University, and then the other guys, Andy Block and Brendan O'Keefe, they were from down in Larchmont, in Westchester County, and we just got together and started doing all this crazy original material. And we got a singer. We had Janice Dempsey Gantz for a while, and then oh man, she's gonna kill me. I'm spacing on her. Oh boy, I'll think of it in a minute.
Yeah.
The other singer that joined us, but she was great too. But eventually, Jay Oliver from St. Louis, I pulled him up to the East Coast from St. Louis, and he joined Night Sprite, and we started getting some really good gigs. Dan Walensky came into the band, sax player, and the writing changed, and we started to get some gigs in town in New York City. We played McKell's, we played 7th Avenue South,
Mm-hmm.
which was the Brecker Brothers Club at that time, and that gig would have been in 1981 probably, and Andy Block was taking lessons from Steve Kahn, great guitar
Mm-hmm.
player. And I had been hounding Erskine for years. I had been sending cassettes and bugging him to death, So I think Steve Kahn just grabbed Peter. It was at the time when Peter was living in the city, and he brought him they both came to the gig. And it was because of that gig that Peter recommended me for something he couldn't do, which was a French Toast gig. It was the name of the band. And French Toast had all these great studio musicians in it.
Yeah.
Anthony Jackson mainly was the bass player.
Yeah.
Michelle Camillo was, this was kind of the beginning of the Michelle Camillo band, but the late great Lou Soloff was in the band.
Mm-hmm.
And it was called French Toast because Peter Gordon was the French horn player in the band.
Right.
And that was, me getting recommended for that was my breakthrough in town in New York. That was the reason I got in. And but yeah, man, the Night Sprite days were the formidable years, the beginning of it all. It was fantastic. Great. And those guys, all those guys are such great musicians still to this day. They're very successful, really great players,
Yeah, yeah. And like I said, playing with that band seemed like it opened doors, opportunities for you. And wasn't Peter Erskine really instrumental in helping you get gigs with some of these big artists? He sort of helped you?
Well, like I said, Peter was the one that recommended me for French Toast. And after that happened, it was really Anthony Jackson that started recommending me for everything under the sun in the city.
Wow.
So that led to different gigs with different guys in the town. I started to get to play with all the cats, started the studio work. I got the Paul Simon and Garfunkel gig because of Anthony. And then Michael Brecker, from doing stuff with him and playing a few gigs and studio dates, recommended me to Chick. Because Chick was asking about, who's the guy, the new young guy in town, or blah blah blah. So, and that's how the Electric Band started.
Wow. It's funny you mentioned that. I had Chick on the show a couple of weeks ago, had John Patitucci on too. And I thought about those two, and I says, I got to get Dave on. But what was it like, man, getting together with that band? Because a lot of people were saying, well, man, this is like the return to forever of the 80s, And you had these young musicians who were just very, very talented. But what was it like playing with Chick? What was your perception of him and getting in that band at the time?
Well, of course, it was a sort of one of those, pinch yourself things. I remember, and I've told the story a bunch of times, but I was playing with Bill Connors, who was Chick's first guitar player in Return to Forever, with Tom Kennedy, my buddy, my bro. And we were playing at the Bottom Line in New York, and Chick happened to be in New York with a night off, and he had gotten the recommendation. So Gail Moran, his wife, saw the name in the paper, Village Voice or whatever it was, and they came in, and I saw them walk in the gig. I was like, holy crap, man, that's Chick. I was 24, I think. I was just doing I was really, really enjoying, trying to get into the studio thing and climb the ladder and play, doing a lot of gigs and a lot of stuff. It was just an amazing time, very inspiring, and yeah, he walked in, he came backstage, and it was it. He was like, "You want to come out and play?" You know, I was like, "Let me think about that." Yeah, yeah. So.
Man, that is great. You know, I was just going to ask you. You know, actually, the first time I think I saw you play, because started listening to, you know, that early stuff like Light Years, and of course all the stuff you guys did, Beneath the Mask, Eye of the Beholder. All of it was just fantastic. But I think the first time I saw you play, Dave, was GRP Super Live in Japan. You guys did a concert. I'm like, man, who is this drummer? And I just loved it, man. You guys were cooking. That's when you had Frank Mbali and Eric Marienthal, that whole band. But yeah, the stuff that you guys did during that time period was just fantastic. And actually, my favorite recording of yours still to this day is Master Plan, your debut album, man. That one, I still have that in the car. I play it constantly. Here and Now is one of my favorite songs, man. I love that recording. And you had some heavyweights on there too. I mean, you know, one of the best rhythm sections. I actually had Al Di Meola on the show yesterday, and he says, man, one of the tightest rhythm sections, and you see these guys play together a lot, is Steve Gadd and Anthony Jackson, and you had both of them on that recording. What was it like? It was like an all-star group of musicians you had on your debut album, man. What was that like?
Well, Master Plan was a master plan.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, GRP offered me the record deal a year before I took it, actually, and I turned it down. I said, I'm not ready to do this yet. I've got this other project in mind that I want to do first, to get out there to the drummers, get, you know, sort of just expand the audience and try to get as many people interested, you know, as possible through the drumming channel, through the drumming community. And I had this project in my mind since I was a teenager, to do this really, you know, kind of thoroughly deep contemporary play along package, a music -1 type of thing. And because there was really nothing on the market quite like it at the time. And and so Jay Oliver and I put this thing together that was called Contemporary Drummer +1. And we produced it kind of like a record. And in fact, I think a couple of the tunes that were on Master Plan were on that project as well. But no, man, when I got the opportunity after that project came out, you know, it was just like, okay, you know, they gave me a pretty decent budget, and it's like we did the whole thing except for the title track, Master Plan, in St. Louis in Jay's studio. So we really didn't have any overhead, so I could afford to, you know, to pay the cats to come in and do it. So yeah, I had Michael Brecker on there, I had Chick on there, you know, a lot of Anthony was on half the record. You know, some other guys that we hired as well. So and Steve, of course, the Master Plan thing. That goes back to the first thing I told you about, which was the first time I heard Steve, was with Chick and Anthony, and it was recorded by Bernie Kirsch in Mad Hatter Studios in Los Angeles. So my idea was to recreate the session and put me in the middle of it.
Wow.
Basically, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to kind of recreate that atmosphere and that vibe. And I asked Chick to write the song, the title track, and of course he wrote, you know, a masterpiece in about 5 minutes. And I think, and I remember being as sick as a dog that day. But when we recorded it, but I was like, there's nothing gonna, you know, get in the way of this. And yeah, it was incredible. I mean, you know, to play with Steve. I mean, I had played with him a few times. We had done we had already done the kind of famous trio thing with the Buddy Rich Memorial with me and Steve and Vinny Caliuta. And so I had played with Steve a couple times, but that session was really cool because, like I said, Bernie was the engineer. We were in the same studio. it was all done live. You know, it was really kind of the only song except for the Straight Ahead tune on there with Roy Kennedy and Tom that was live. Everything else was layered production. So yeah, we did. You know, Steve and I were talking through the chart, who takes the lead on which section, and you know, just kind of ironing it all out. And I mean, it didn't take long. It was by the second or third take, I think we pretty much had it, you know, and it was, again, it was just kind of a continuation of, you know, pinch myself and like, you know, wow, is this really kind of happening, you know? So, you know, and Steve has just always been one of my, you know, favorite guys that,
everyone, yeah.
He's just such an icon in the history of what we do, what we try to do, and to be able to play with him on that was a huge honor. It was really cool.
Yeah, phenomenal recording. And like I said, you were with the Chick Corea Electric Band from '85 to '91. You guys did an acoustic recording, the three of you, Patitucci and Chick. And I was going to say, during that time period also, Dave, you guys were like on each other's recordings. I would look at this record of Eric Marienthal. I would see John Pettit. I said, man, you guys are just constantly working together, and it was just some great stuff. Now, I know Buddy Rich was also a big influence on you. And before he passed away, did you get a chance to meet him and spend any time with him, Dave?
Got a chance to meet him once because of one of my first teachers, Bob Matheny, that I had mentioned. He took me to a show and got to hang out a little bit. But I was 14. I was really shy. I was not forward enough to like just stand up there and say, "Yo, man, you know, buddy, show me something." You know.
Right.
So I was super shy. So that, you know, I actually have the picture. And somehow when somebody took the picture, some woman got in the middle of me and Buddy. And I was so pissed that I didn't have the you know, the balls to say, "Hey, you know, take another one just with me," you know. And it's like, that's my one regret. I think it's, you know, is that I wasn't more forward with trying to hook up with and spend more time with him, you know. So I in my home, I've got the picture. I cut her out. I just cut her out of the picture.
You actually did that? Oh man.
I cut her out. Yeah, Buddy was, he was my real first obsession after Jack Sperling. And Buddy was, I mean, I spent countless hours in my living room. Actually, the drums were set up. This is what I mean. There was no sibling competition and total parental support. You know, the drums were set up in the living room, and I was blasting this big, you know, dual 12-inch speaker, you know, console stereo system. You know, and I had headphones on. I'm trying to figure out all the Buddy stuff, and yeah, I mean, he still is. You know, just some of the stuff you know, we all kind of, you know, as drummers, it's sort of like, what? Really? It's like, how, you know, freak of nature, you know. So we all, you know, we all learned a lot from him, and the inspiration continues, and it will forever. And it's a lot of how I play is coming out of, you know, at least that one step of that formation, you know, of listening and being inspired by him. So
yeah, I was interested in knowing how you got a chance to play with Robert Plant, another great musician.
Well, I was on the Honey Drippers record back in that period when I was getting recommended for everything under the sun. I started working a lot for Nile Rodgers, actually. And Nile was producing everybody at that time. I mean, I did records with Benson, George Benson, Diana Ross, Peebo Bryson.
Right.
Those are the ones that come to mind quickly. But I actually did some overdubs on Madonna's Like a Virgin record. And, you know, he was just calling me for everything. And that was I'll never forget it. It was a Sunday afternoon. It was a last minute call. Robert was in New York, and he called me. He said, "Man," he goes, "Jeff Beck is here. You know, we got Wayne Pedswater playing on this thing on bass, left-handed bass player, who passed away way too soon as well. And he said, he's here. It's a live session. Can you make it?" Like, I had to be there in 2 hours, you know. So I'm, you know, called my cartage guy. I was like, "Can you get the drums over to Atlantic Records? We got to do that." And it was just one of those moments, man. And I think we recorded 2 or 3 tunes, but the one that made the record was the Shuffle, Rockin' at Midnight. And it was live. I mean, he sang. He probably overdubbed his vocals again later, but maybe not. I mean, he was in the sound corridor between the control room door and the studio door. He was just sitting in there, and you know, they had those long windows like this in those doors, and I remember just seeing his afro, you know, and the hair, and singing. It was just fantastic, man. It was what a great moment that was. Yeah, but it was part of the studio session period that I was doing in New York, 1984, 85, somewhere around there.
Great. I was also going to ask you a little bit about teaching, because I know that you teach people online. Is that something that you enjoy doing, or is it something, I guess, as a result of the COVID-19, a lot of musicians are doing that? Is that something that you enjoy doing, teaching?
Yeah, I've always enjoyed it. I've been teaching, doing clinics for a long time. I usually don't, you know, I don't do it. And let's put it this way: I wasn't planning on being a full-time teacher as soon as I was forced to, because of this crazy pandemic. But yeah, it kind of forced me to get my situation together at home with, you know, multi-cameras and switchers, and you know, figuring out the whole scene. And you know, this is, you know, this is a very little room that I had built in Italy here.
Yeah.
Been struggling to get it happening here because I don't have quite the gear that I have in LA, but I'm getting it working. The internet was the biggest problem. Our internet has been the internet's been down here for over a week now, the hard line, which is only DSL. I mean, we're in a great place here. It's on the mountainside, wine country. The closest neighbor is a half mile away. I can play all night if I want to, but there's no. I mean, we can't even get cable modem up here, much less fiber or anything like that. So I went and bought, just yesterday, I got this working actually, and it seems to be stable. So I'm starting to book some lessons now, but I just bought this really nice high-end mobile router that's you can stick a SIM card in it, or you can use it with Ethernet as well. So we're on that signal right now. So hopefully it's hanging in there and doing okay. But yeah, the teaching, I really enjoy it. I've had almost 100 students, you know, since this whole thing started.
That's great.
And yeah, I mean, it's really, you know, I'm very thankful, and you know, that for everybody that signed up, and I'm still doing it. I'm obviously going to be doing it for a while, I think. I mean, doesn't seem to be much alternatives for work. So, but between that and my online school, actually, I started an online school about 3 years ago.
Okay.
With my partner Steve Horkin, who's you know, he does all the admin for the school, and he's got he's the drum fantasy camp guy, and he's got a couple of different things going on as well online with the Groove Masters, and you know, so a lot of drummers are doing classes and doing that type of thing until we can get back to playing. So hopefully we can get back to that you know, sometime soon. But yeah, I love it. I've always enjoyed sharing with anybody that's interested to know what it is that I do, and it really helps me. It makes me analyze, and it makes me research. And it's quite educational, and you know, it kind of forces the issue instead of just, you know, doing what we always do. It's like I had to start figuring out how I did it a long time ago with just doing clinics and, you know, the few private lessons that I would do when I had time. You know, people are like, well, what are you thinking about when you do that? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just doing it, you know, just playing.
Right,
so,
right.
But you start thinking about it, and you know, it's a light switch. It's a kind of a hat to wear that is very different than, a writing creative process or, just a playing, situation. It's different mindsets. So, but I enjoy all the students and, and it's very, very pleasurable for me to think that I can help somebody reach, reach their goals, what they want to become a better player, and at least give them something to think about, to add to their arsenal, another thing. I always tell them, it's like, look, my way is not, I don't by any means, profess that, oh, you got to listen to me. My way's the only way. That's the beauty of it. There's so many ways to do this, and everybody is different. We have our own personal, spiritual aspect that comes through the instrument. So, so the more that we can pick up from as many different people as possible to make up our own mind how we want to do something. But for me, it's just sharing all the stuff that I've learned from all my great teachers. Like I said, Freddie Gruber, was very instrumental. Gary Chester was huge with the new breed aspect, and I mentioned my first teachers, Bob Matheny and Joe Berger. I studied with Randy Jones for a while, and Ed Soph was very instrumental in my college days. I took a couple of lessons with him, more than a couple, and yeah, along the way. But like I said, my last real teacher was Freddie, and Freddie Gruber kind of, I don't know, he just presented another approach, another way of thinking about things that was not so drumistic. It was more about kind of laws of physics stuff, not fighting yourself or getting in the way. So it's become a very kind of fluid, natural approach for me, where I try to let the sticks do as much of the work as possible while still maintaining control. And it's really helped me get to the music better. That's the whole purpose of it. It's not about the technique. It's not about, trying to be the next Buddy Rich or whoever. It's about how you support the music, how you make the people feel when you're playing behind them. What's that support, mechanism that's happening? And that's the beauty of the music. Everybody's different, so it's a different conversation. It's a different dialogue, and it's a different relationship for everybody that we play with. So, so I'm having fun with it. I'm having a lot of fun in my school. That we have over 40 hours of material on the school now, and the online teaching thing, which I will just go ahead and say can be accessed through my website, daveweckl.com. It's just a splash page right on the front page there to go and check out those things. So, yeah, I'm planning on trying to stay in Italy for a little while, so I'm gonna be teaching from here as well. So
Great,
I'm
man.
Full steam ahead at this point.
That's great. I was going to ask you, Dave, when you're home and just relaxing, maybe with your wife, or you have a glass of wine and you're just taking it easy, what are you listening to? What artists are you listening to? Or are there any up and coming drummers that you're checking out and saying, man, this guy's got a lot of talent? I'm just curious, what does Dave Weckl listen to when he's just home?
Well, honestly, when I have at home, my wife and I have been long distance for a long time. We've been together for 11 years now, and married for 5, and we've maintained 2 different residents in that whole period. We kind of go like this, and the pandemic has sort of screwed that all up. But that's why I made the jump to come over here while I could, and just kind of hang and try to work from here as well. But when I'm home, working as much as I do, I'm usually involved in the studio for many hours a day, doing either teaching or maybe trying to write or doing tracks for people or projects, whatever I'm doing. Because I really get into the studio aspect of the mixing side of things and the production side, and now film editing and that whole thing. So there's a lot of stuff out there that many of us are doing now. We're all doing these COVID projects, to put online and put out there. So, but honestly, when I'm free to not be working and not be in the studio, the last thing I do is listen to music. Honestly,
Gotcha. Interesting.
You know what I mean? Yeah, I take the break and I absorb in either watching a movie or a documentary, try to learn something, or I'll get on my racing sim and drive some laps on, some of the Formula One circuits or something,
Mhm.
just to break away and get away from it.
Sure.
It keeps it fresh, and it doesn't make it feel like such a job. I mean, this is at this point in my career, of course, but when I was younger, I was listening to a lot of things just to learn, to grasp, what the different cultures of music, different styles, and all that stuff. But having said that, hanging out with my wife, I mean, my wife's name is Clivia Tanisi, by the way, and
Oh,
we've done a project together that she's out there too now, kind of coming back to singing after 20 years, and
oh wow.
from raising her kids, and yeah, so we produced a project together that just came out. It's called Love's Way Back.
I need to
And
listen to that, man. I
yeah,
need to check
yeah,
that
it's
out.
out there. She's got we did like a 5-song EP, and so that's out there. And you could go to her website, cliviatanisi.com, cliviatanisimusic.com,
Okay.
or just punch in her name, and it's Clivia, like the flowers, Clivia, Tanisi, Tanisi, and either on YouTube or it's everywhere. It's a streaming EP, so it's everywhere out there. And she's done a couple of videos on it too. So, but when we're together hanging out, we're kind of listening to, because she's already got her next project in mind.
Mhm.
So we're listening to the next songs that we might do, and but to be honest, man, we like a lot of different styles. So we
Yeah.
listen to many different things. I love old R&B, pop, even rock stuff, and and then classical mood. Can
Yeah.
be classical music. Not any particular thing for me, but it's diversified. It really depends. Then the other part of the question, man, there's so many great young players. I mean,
Mhm.
it's mind-boggling how many there are, of younger generations. It wouldn't be fair to mention anybody because I don't know so many of the guys, but man, there's some amazing talent out there, and some of my students too in the school are very talented as well. So
Mm.
it's really cool to see the continuing evolution of where the younger players take over, take it from from the older players like us, and then the history of it. That's what I'm always trying to actually profess in the school, and also when I teach is go check out the history. You've got to understand where we came from, where the guys right before us came from, and you got to keep going back. You got to get the depth of the history to understand
Mhm.
where it's coming from. You can't just start from 2010. You got to go you got to go back.
That's right.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, Dave. There's an individual, a drummer's name that just constantly keeps coming up. When I'm interviewing or talking to other musicians and drummers, and I had Lenny White on, and the name Tony Williams keeps coming up constantly. And I know your friend Vinny Colaiuta is crazy about Tony Williams, but did Tony have an influence on you?
Absolutely, not as much. I kind of credit or blame, however you want to look at it, on where I was raised. Because in the Midwest, it wasn't about the deep bebop stuff. At least not with the
Right.
people I was hanging out with. We were more into the fusion thing, the big band thing, and like I said, not until I got to New York did I start to dive in heavier, and was exposed to, Tony and, a lot of the other guys. But Tony in particular, we actually played a lot of shows
Mm.
together back in the day when we were touring with the acoustic band, Tony's band with Mulgrew Miller and Wallace Rooney. And
yeah.
it's so sad about Wallace.
Yeah, I know.
But I got to kind of stand backstage and watch Tony a whole lot, and of course he was another kind of freak of nature, another force, that was just incredible. I mean, he was a great composer as well. He, very inspirational, and his technique is something that is still very different, you know, than most guys. And but he was, yeah, he was really. There's a lot of times I reference Tony when I'm playing, you know, and it's you know, from all the way back from the, you know, the 4 and More days of when he was 17, and, you know, up through the VSOP days and his own stuff later before he passed too. It was too early, you know. But Tony cracked me up, man. There was one time I was in New York, and Tony Tony did a clinic at Drummers Collective, and I went. I was hanging, and you know, it's about 150, 200 people in the room, I guess, and he wasn't having a great day. He was not happy, and he was playing, and he played about 20 minutes. He stopped and stood up, and he said, "All right, any questions?" And of course, you know what happened. The room was silent, right? And he says, "Okay, thank you very much," and he starts to leave. And another, God, all these people who have passed. Kim Plainfield, his good friend that passed as well. Kim was teaching there, right? Kim puts up his hand. He goes, "Tony, I got a question." And Tony turns around and comes back to the mic, and he said, "Too late." And he split.
You're kidding. Oh my gosh.
No, he wasn't happy that day, but he still played unbelievably, you know.
Yeah.
It was great. But
wow.
But yeah, that was my a very memorable. To me, it was funny as hell. I was just, oh man, wow, it's funny, you know.
That's great.
Yeah. So big influence.
Well, listen, man, you're also a big influence, and I want to thank you today for being on Jazz Talk. It's been a pleasure just chatting with you. Like I said, your body of work and the contribution that you've made to this art form called jazz, I love it. And hold on, I'm about to close out the show. Well, you've heard it from the great Dave Weckl, and as the saying goes, if the music grooves and makes you move, it must be jazz. I'm Preston Williams with Jazz Talk signing off. Peace.
Cool, man.